This is the most haunting experience that she has ever had. Creepy story time. So this woman, Cecilia, is sharing her story, and she said that she doesn't mind being tagged below. She says she's had a lot of creepy experiences in her life, but this one chills her to the bone. This happened when she was 34 years old. She's 35 now. So she has 2 hound dogs, and her husband make a really loud kissy sound when they're trying to call them. That's relevant to the story. So Cecilia is just sitting in her recliner listening to some music with her headphones in. All of a sudden, she decided to just press pause for a minute. So at this point, it's silent. Nothing is playing through the headphones. And then all of a sudden, right up in her ear, as though it was coming through her headphones, was this extremely loud mwah kiss sound, sounding exactly like how it does when her husband makes the sound. She said she fully expected to see him when she turned to look, but nobody was there. Well, at least her husband wasn't. As she is looking around to hopefully see her husband, she is starting to have the worst panic attack she has ever had in her life. She knew something was in her house and she knew it wasn't good. So she called her husband while he was at work. So she's on the phone with him and he goes, "Did you just make a kissy sound in the phone?" No, she did not. No. So she said she grabs her rosary for protection, puts it on, and heads to the back door. She said she has her arms spread out wide like Jesus on the cross, and she is yelling, "I have God, you have nothing. I have God backing me up and the Son and the Holy Spirit." Basically telling this thing to go back to hell where it belonged. Once those words came out of her mouth, she could hear from the back of the property the lowest, most demonic growl she has ever heard in her life. So now she can't go out there. She goes back into the house. She closed the door. She calmed herself down. She said a prayer, and eventually she was able to get to sleep. I mean, I don't know how. I would not have, but good on ya. But she was not prepared for what she was about to wake up to. She said she looked out her back door and gasped. There were 3 long slash marks in her tree that were at least 4 inches deep. Whatever the heck that thing was not happy. She says it's almost 2 years later and those marks are still there, fading. So leave your thoughts in the comments, and if you have any questions, drop them there. She might be able to answer them for you. She'll be keeping an eye. And as always, don't forget to follow for more creepy story time.
Story time. Growing up in the 90s, I had a great aunt named Martha, and she was a wonderful woman. And when I tell you she was one with nature, this woman had up-teen wild animals in her yard. Aunt Martha had always taken care of these animals. Didn't even have to have food. They would just come to her. So one day, I'm hanging out with her, and we're shelling butter beans on the back porch, when all of a sudden, one of the most beautiful animals I had ever seen walked up into her backyard. White deer. I had never seen an albino or snow white deer ever before. This deer was absolutely majestic. He had the biggest set of horns we ever saw, big full mane, bright blue eyes, and a big bushy tail. He was gorgeous. So while me and Aunt Martha's jaws are dropped from looking at this beautiful creature, the neighbor walks over and says, "Oh my God, what is that? Let me go get my pew pew. I have to get it." And Aunt Martha said, "Don't you dare." He said, "Why? It's just going to eat, poop, and die at some point anyways." She said, "Leave it alone. This is their home and their safe place." I said, "Matthew, I've warned you before about this. If you mess with nature here on this property, you know what's going to happen." He said, "Oh, I don't believe your old ghost stories. That don't scare me." She said, "Why won't you just leave it alone? It's just trying to live its life." He said, "Because it's so beautiful, rare, and unique. I think it would look good over my fireplace." Aunt Martha turned and said, "Well, maybe you would look good over my fireplace." So he walks away, and we can tell he's fuming, and she looks at me and says, "He'll be back." It seemed like something more was going on. I just didn't know what it was. I said, "What do you mean? Why would he come back?" She said, "Because he's already seen it. He's not going to be able to let go of this now. He's going to try to unalive that beautiful deer. But we can't let that happen." So we took a bag of corn way out in the woods and lured them away from the backyard. Where we took the deer corn was on her property, on the backside, so this neighbor had no business being over there. Even though we put out that corn, the animals still came back. They always came back. They loved her. We see that beautiful white deer walk up in the backyard again. So the next morning, we're back on the porch, shelling more butter beans, when the neighbor walks over again and says, "Hey, have y'all seen that deer again?" Martha said, "No, we haven't seen nothing today." And Martha said, "Didn't I warn you before about this? You didn't learn your lesson?" I said, "I'm telling you, this is not the kind of land that you want to hurt these animals. It will come back on you." I said, "Aunt Martha, tell me, why did you say you didn't learn your lesson? What happened before?" She said, "Back when Matthew and his wife first moved here, they were pulling up in their driveway, and Matthew saw this big rabbit hopping across the road. So Matthew gets back in the car, backs out the driveway, floors the gas, and hits the rabbit on purpose. Yeah, he did it just to unalive it. They didn't eat it, they didn't keep the skin, we got nothing out of hurting this rabbit. Well, you can say it's connected or not, I don't know, but 2 weeks later, Matthew himself got hit by a car in the same damn spot. On his day off, Matthew went outside with his coffee to check the mail, and when he walked back up the driveway, his wife backed out of the yard. She was late for work, so she stomped the gas and she hit Matthew. It did not alive him, but he did break his leg. When Matthew got out of the hospital, his wife was rolling him into the house. Aunt Martha walked up and said, "Matthew, I warned you, if you hurt the animals here, they will hurt you back." Matthew said, "Martha, it was an accident. She didn't see me out there. This is ridiculous. Go home." So Martha pulled Matthew's wife over to the side and said, "Look, I'm telling you, if he doesn't stop hurting these animals, this is only going to get worse." Now fast forward to where I'm spending the night with Aunt Martha, and we're sitting on the porch. It's like 6 o'clock in the evening, and we see that beautiful white deer walk up in the backyard again. It's dark, but we can tell it's him because it's a solid white deer. Anyone can spot it. Well, I'm sleeping on the couch, and around 4 a.m., we hear a loud bam, like gunfire. So Martha goes flying out the front door in her housecoat, yelling, "What's going on out here?" And then we see Matthew come walking down the street with his rifle. Martha screams out, "You didn't! Please tell me you didn't hurt that beautiful deer." And Matthew said, "I couldn't get to it, but I got to another one." He had unalived a baby fawn, a little fawn that was just walking around eating with its mother. He said, "That's not all. I got the mama too. We're fixing to go pull her out the woods." She said, "You killed the mother?" And Aunt Martha lost it. "How many times have I warned you? This place is not like other places. You can't mess with the animals here. Treat the land with respect." He said, "Get your crazy ass out of my face and go the fuck home." Martha said, "Well, the same way you drug them deers out the woods is the same way they're going to drag your body out those woods. Watch and see." He said, "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" She said, "You'll see. You just sealed your own fate. Y'all prepare yourselves because what happened that winter blew my mind." I was staying with Aunt Martha and we were putting up the Christmas tree when we heard a bunch of ambulances coming down the road. The neighbors we had were all standing out in the road like, "What is going on? What happened?" But nobody knew. So we walked down the road to see what's going on, and that's where we see 3 men dragging Matthew by his feet out the woods, and he's pouring. It turned out early that morning, Matthew had taken his 8-year-old son hunting for the first time. This child had never been before, had never handled a weapon, and didn't know what he was doing. It was a recipe for disaster. The child's walking in the woods behind his daddy. He trips and stumbles over a root, drops the weapon. It goes off, hits Matthew in the back. Matthew looked like a damn strainer. The bullets had spread out from his shoulders down to his waist. Because they had walked so far up in the woods, it took the child damn near 45 minutes to run back home and call 911. It took first responders over 5 hours to find Matthew because they were so deep in the woods. And guess where they found Matthew's body? He was sitting up against a tree beside them old stones where Aunt Martha had taken me before. The little boy told police that was not where the accident happened. He says they were down at the creek. We have no idea how Matthew got from the creek to the stones. You're talking about a damn near hour's walk. How would he have gotten that far with all those injuries? What else is strange? When they did his autopsy, they found these big gashes. It looked like an animal with antlers had been ramming him. There were cuts, bruises, and abrasions, but especially gashes all over his back, shoulders, and the back of his head. It looked like someone had taken a set of deer antlers and just jabbed him repeatedly in his back. It was really sad because Matthew's son, he was just 8 years old. He didn't have any safety, didn't know what he was doing. Matthew had no business giving that child a weapon. And what's so crazy, when this little boy turned 13, he told his new stepdaddy that the day his father died, he saw a white deer before he tripped over the root. And when that little boy said that and it got around the neighborhood, me and Aunt Martha were like, full circle. You cannot tell me that white deer didn't know what the hell he was doing. I know he did. He got Matthew's ass. What really gave me chills was the fact that what Aunt Martha said came true. When she told Matthew, they're going to drag you out of these woods the same way you're dragging these animals out, pouring blood. And that was what happened. My Aunt Martha was one with nature. She's passed on now, but when I tell you, I go outside sometimes, and when I see deer, squirrels, and rabbits, I swear I can feel her. I truly believe she's been reincarnated as an animal, and she's living her best life. And anyone who lives in that part of North Carolina, or my family that knows about this, don't say anything in the comments about where this happened because we don't want people going down there.
I have another spooky story for you guys. A teacher sent in this story about a haunted school that she worked at for over 10 years. And it all started with a PA system or an intercom system that turned on all on its own and would start speaking without anyone being there. Let's get right into the story. This happened over 20 years ago when I was teaching at a small middle school in a rural part of Pennsylvania. The town had maybe 2,000 people, and the school sat at the end of a long, 2-lane road that was surrounded by fields and woods. There wasn't much else around, mainly just farmland and that old brick building. The first few months I worked there, I noticed how quiet it got after the kids left for the day. There were no after-school activities, so if anyone stayed behind, it would be the teachers and maybe some administrators. Around 5 or 6 in the evening, you could hear every little sound. That's also when I first noticed the intercom. This was an ancient PA system that crackled and buzzed anytime someone tried to make an announcement. The secretary used to joke that it had a mind of its own. At first, I didn't think much of it. Old wiring, probably. I was usually one of the last teachers to leave because I preferred to stay late grading papers rather than take my work home. I'd have my classroom door propped open, music playing softly, and then out of nowhere, the intercom would click on. I'd hear a faint static sound, and then silence. It always made me suspicious because to turn that system on, someone had to press the microphone button in the front office. But anyone who would use the system would already be gone for the day. So one night, I decided to check it out. I figured maybe someone was in the office, so I walked down the hall, but every room I passed was dark. When I peeked into the front office, the door was locked, the lights were off, and nobody seemed to be inside. Still, that low hum of static was coming from the hallway speaker right above me. From the window, I could see the red light of the PA system was on. I knocked on the door just in case someone was there, and as soon as I finished knocking, the light turned off. The next morning, I mentioned it to the assistant principal, and she just smiled like it was nothing. She said, "Oh, the system does that sometimes. Don't let it spook you." After that, other strange things started happening. Sometimes the intercom would crackle in the middle of a lesson, and a faint voice would come through. It was never clear enough to make out exactly what it was saying. Just a few words were said that weren't really discernible. A couple of times, I thought I heard someone say, "Help," or "Wait." The sound would cut out almost immediately. Whenever it happened, the students would get quiet, waiting for me to react. I'd glance at the office light, which only turned on when the microphone was active, but it never turned on. Sometimes I'd see kids in the hall after school hours when everyone had already gone home. When I saw them, I would step out of my classroom to ask why they were still in school, but by the time I reached the door, they'd be gone. I figured they were just quick, but what bothered me was that I didn't recognize them. They didn't look like any of our students. They always wore older looking clothes that looked like uniforms. One boy had slicked hair and thick glasses, and a girl always carried a stack of books with a string tied around them. One evening, I was heading out when I saw that same girl standing by the lockers near the end of the hall. The lights above her were flickering, and she was just staring straight ahead, motionless. I called out, "Sweetheart, do you need help getting home?" She turned her head slowly and smiled at me. Her lips moved, but I didn't hear anything. Just then, the intercom popped on again, and a soft voice, a young girl's, said, "Please evacuate the building." The girl's expression didn't change. She just turned away and walked towards the exit, even though the doors were locked for the evening. All of a sudden, the lights flickered off for just a second, and then she was gone. I brought it up at the teacher's lounge the next morning, and everyone just looked at each other. Finally, one of the older teachers said, "You saw one of them." Then she laughed it off like she was kidding, but no one else laughed. That's when I learned the story. Apparently, years before the school was remodeled, there had been a fire during a spring dance in the 1950s. A few students had gotten trapped in one of the classrooms and never made it out. After the remodel, they installed a new PA system, among other things, but people said the old one never really stopped working. The principal, who'd worked there for almost 2 decades, just brushed it off whenever something happened. Her philosophy was simple. The school had history, and as long as the history didn't cause trouble, there was no reason to scare the kids with ghost stories. So that's what we all did. We pretended it wasn't happening. Some nights I'd stay late grading and hear lockers slamming down the hall when I knew I was completely alone. Another time I heard a bell ring at 4:30 p.m., even though the bell had been disconnected years ago during construction. And another time, I saw a girl standing outside my classroom door while I was packing up. She had short curls and wore a pleated skirt like the ones you see in old photos. She smiled when I looked up and vanished when the lights flickered. One morning, a few students told me they'd seen a visitor in the hall, a girl in a gray skirt who asked them where the gym was. The gym, she described, had been torn down during the remodel. After a while, I stopped being afraid. I won't say I got comfortable exactly, but it became part of the job for me. Some nights the intercom would click on and hum for a few minutes. Other times I'd hear faint footsteps in the hallway or see movement in the reflection of classroom windows. I worked there for about 12 years before I finally left. Eventually, the school was shut down since a new, bigger one was built down the road. But up until I left, the newer teachers would always ask me about the strange things they experienced. All I said to them was, "That's normal here." And I meant it. Because after all those years, the ghosts didn't scare me anymore. I learned that they were just part of the building. The ones who never left when the bell rang. Okay, now I have to ask, if you heard an intercom click on and say, "Please evacuate the building," would you actually leave? Or would you stay to try and see exactly what was going on? Let me know what you would do in the comments, and don't forget to follow for the next spooky story.
Let's talk about one of the first ghosts I ever saw. If you're new here, hi. I usually talk about some pretty scary stuff, and I think seeing ghosts kind of ranks pretty high. Just for some context, my brother attended a all-boys Catholic boarding school when he was in high school, and in my state where he went to school, it's in the middle of nowhere, and the building itself is so old that before it was a boarding school, it housed monks. And bear with me because I was like 5 or 6 years old, and I can't remember if we were moving him out of the dorms or into the dorms. But nonetheless, there were families there. My mom was there, my dad was there, my sister was there, kind of wandering around, and my brother and I were in his dorm room. And I say dorm room because at the time, I don't know about now, there were 2 massive oak French doors that opened into this massive room with a bunch of bunk beds that was their dorm. And I remember I was sitting on the bottom of a bunk bed when all of a sudden he grabbed my head and put it into his shoulder and said, "Don't look." And I had no idea what the hell he was talking about because I was like 5, 6. So I peeked over his shoulder. And what I saw is still ingrained in my head. It was a probably 6-foot man in a black cloak with a white face staring into the room. And it's important to note that he didn't have feet. And that's when I tucked my head in and we just kind of sat there for probably a couple minutes before my brother looked back and it was gone. And I never really understood what I saw until I was much older, and my brother and I were talking and he said, "Yeah, the name of my school is very much haunted." Then he told me I'm not the first person to talk to him about this because his friends who also went to the school also saw similar things, like people walking into walls, people disappearing, footsteps in the middle of the night. And I always forget about that story, but from time to time it flashes in my head and I get chills every time. But that's going to do it for me. Stay tuned for more.
Hey, y'all want to hear about this Appalachian mountain story? All right, come on, come sit down. Hurry up. So this woman is from Traverse City, Michigan. She said that she went to go visit some family in the Appalachian Mountains. Girl, you should have did some reading before you went there, Pooh. All right, so fast forward, her father asked her where she wanted to go for the summer, and she told her father, "I want to go see my first cousin. Like, I want to spend some time with her. I haven't seen her in years." He said, "Okay," boom. He buys her a plane ticket, all is well. So she said when she first got there, her auntie was pretty much laying down the law like, "Oh, we don't do this here. We don't do that here. We don't do X, Y, and Z here." And she said that she really was taking it with a grain of salt. It was going in one ear and out the other. She really wasn't listening. So fast forward, she said it was late, and she said that she happened to go in the kitchen, and she happened to look out the kitchen window, and she noticed that it looked like somebody was staring down at her from the tree. So then she goes to the door, she opens the door, and she stands on the porch, and she's basically glaring at the tree, trying to see, is it something staring at me? Fast forward, she starts hearing rustling in the trees, and she ran off. She said she can't remember if she closed the door or not. She just ran away from the door, ran back there to her cousin, and she said, "Hey, I'm pretty sure it's something in the tree." So the cousin jumps up and was just like, "You didn't open the door, right?" Right? So then when the cousin jumped up out of the bed and she ran to the front, she noticed the door was wide open, and it sounded like somebody was in the house or something was in the house. So the cousin ran to the front, and when the cousin ran to the front, she did notice that the door was open, and she said that her cousin was trying to close the door, but it took 2 of them to close the door because it's almost like something was blocking them from shutting the door. So then the cousin is going around making sure all the windows are shut and doing stuff like that, because then she starts to hear her name. So she sees her cousin doing all of this, and she instantly thinks, "What is wrong with you?" So then she looked at her cousin like, "You tripping." She like, "Didn't you hear anything that my mom told you when you first got here?" She was just like, "I don't really believe in that. I don't believe that there are mythical creatures around here torturing y'all." So the cousin basically was just like, "You know what? Okay, whatever. We just gonna stay in my room. I'm gonna lock the door, and we're gonna lay down. We're gonna chill." So she said her and her cousin stayed in the room pretty much, but then she said it sounded like whatever was out there was banging down every single door that it could possibly be banged down. She said it was the back door, it sounded like the side door, it sounded like the front door. But then she said the next thing you know, it sounded like a door came flying open or something, because she heard something walking out there. And she said before she had a chance to open up the room door to investigate, that when she was about to reach for the doorknob, she said that something stuck their long animal-like fingers up under the door trying to reach in there. So then she said that she really wanted to open the door because she was like, oh my God, it is an animal in here. I got to get the animal out. Like, girl, and if it is an animal sticking their paw or their fingers up under the door, why you want to open the door? Do you know that I will be in there forever? So basically, she said after that happened, they pretty much, were in there all night. The cousin was like urging her, don't open that door, leave the door alone, wait until daylight. Like, please wait until daylight. Daylight comes, the auntie is finally home from the other family member's house that she was at, and she started talking to her niece, and she was just like, you didn't listen to nothing that I told you, She was just like, I know that you don't believe it. She said, but it is real. She was like, so when you do come here to visit, you have to keep in mind that you can't do what you want to do out here. Everybody gets out the house, and they pretty much, about to go on about their day. When they're walking out the house, the auntie starts to walk around the house to inspect everything. And while she's walking out the house inspecting, she noticed that there are animal footprints that looks like they turned into human footprints. This is nuts. Can y'all please tell me, so people who live in the Appalachian Mountains, I really want to visit there someday, but I don't want to visit and be trapped there because it's stuff like this. Because baby, I'll never leave out the room. Never. You'll never catch me.
Not only is this Ouija board story terrifying, it's actually true. I don't know the name of the person who posted it, so we're gonna name her Brittany because it feels like it fits the theme of the names in this story, which I'm pretty sure have been changed because these are pretty generic names. So I'm just gonna refer to her as Brittany. So Brittany goes to college and she meets a girl named Meg. Her and Meg become best friends. Meg has two other friends that she had lived with the year prior before her and Brittany became roommates and best friends. Those two girls were still around even though they don't live with them. So Brittany feels off about the two friends named Kayla and Becca, but mostly Kayla. Kayla's the one that has really bad vibes, and one day Brittany brings this up to Meg because they're talking about their spiritual upbringings and how Brittany was raised Catholic but doesn't practice anymore. So Brittany brings up to Meg like, hey, Kayla has really bad vibes. There's something off about her. Have you noticed this? And Meg's like, funny you say that, because when we were living together, she and Becca would often play the Ouija board in our dorm room, but I never participated. I merely was around. And then Meg goes on to mention that Kayla has this antique doll that she acquired from her grandmother, and she frequently used the Ouija board to talk to the entity that is attached to the doll, which she calls the Tall Man. During the time that Meg was living with Kayla, and Kayla had her doll and entity there and was using the Ouija board all the time, Meg would frequently wake up during the day when she was taking a nap or at night when she was sleeping to a very tall, like billowing figure in the corner of her room. Actually, the first time she started experiencing this, she brought it up to Kayla, and Kayla's like, oh yeah, that's the Tall Man. He's attached to my doll. Another thing Meg mentioned is that one time she walked in while Kayla and Becca were playing the Ouija board, and the planchette flew off the board at her, like mid-question, and Kayla was like, oh, the Tall Man doesn't like having other people around that much. Then Meg mentions that as it got closer to move out time at the end of the year when she was living with Becca and Kayla, that every night the figure, the Tall Man, was getting closer and closer and closer to her until one night she woke up and he was actually standing over her. But she said after that, right before they moved out, she didn't have any experiences. So fast forward to after
Brittany and Meg have lived together, and now they've moved out of that apartment, and another girl has moved into it named Jess. Jess, they know through mutual people. Jess was a heavily practicing Catholic, but she was also open-minded. So one day, Meg and Brittany run into Jess, and she just looks exhausted, worn down, and they're like, "Are you okay? Like, is something wrong?" And she just bursts into tears and starts telling them how something has been harassing her in her apartment. She said that her cabinet doors would be opening and slamming constantly. The front door would be opening and slamming constantly. She even had called the police because she thought someone was trying to break into her apartment. And then when they got there, they like kind of laughed her off. Rude. And she also said she would be asleep and she would get woken up by cold hands smacking her. And then she started seeing a tall, billowing figure standing in the corner and at the foot of her bed. So she was so terrified, she ended up asking her sister to come and stay with her. She said her sister had also started experiencing things while she was staying there. Like one night she was taking a shower and the cabinets in the bathroom started opening and slamming over and over. And then the shower curtain was like ripped open and she heard footsteps running up and down the hallway. So Meg tells Jess, "You should go and talk to Kayla about this because basically this is Kayla's entity." And so Jess does so, and she goes and talks to Kayla, and Kayla is like, "He doesn't like strangers, and good luck," and laughs. Jess ended up having to stay there for the remainder of the school year, and they had one more encounter, her and her sister. One day, the crucifix in Jess's room started violently shaking and fell off the wall. The closet door also started opening and slamming over and over again. Jess and her sister are both in the room when this is happening. Jess starts crying because she has had it. She cannot take this anymore. And her sister's like, "We're just gonna pray, okay? We're just gonna pray. Don't look, just pray." So they start praying their Catholic prayers, and they said like a white light flashed and everything settled, and that seemed to work. So for the next 3 months, the rest of the 3 months that she was living there, nothing else happened. But if you take anything from this story, 1, don't play a Ouija board, and 2, maybe don't be friends with people who use Ouija boards and summon demons or shadow figures into dolls.
My family lives near the Appalachian Trail, and I've lived near the Appalachian Trail for nearly my entire life in 2 different states. Actually, 3 different states, sorry. 3 different states I've lived almost really close to the Appalachian Trail. And people are always talking about how beautiful the trail is itself, like how tranquil it is and whatever. And my husband, who moved from Brazil, had never been there before. So we naturally decided to go camping there one time. I don't know if you're like familiar with Appalachia or anything, but once you step into those woods, like you can feel a significant change in the atmosphere. Like the energy just gets way more heavy and it's just weird. It feels off. You know that feeling in your gut when you just like know something's off? That's kind of how I was feeling the entire time that we were on the trail, but my husband was having a grand old time, and so I just pushed on. I was like, he's having a great time. He's never been out in these types of woods before. We're just gonna keep going. Whatever, we hiked on, and then we finally found our little camping spot, and when we did set up our camping spot, that's when I noticed that the sounds in the forest had stopped. And if you know anything about the woods, that is not a good sign. We set up our camping spot anyways. I kind of glanced over at my husband to see if he was picking up on what the energy was around the woods, and he totally was too, but he didn't say anything about it, and we just kind of pressed on. Surprisingly though, we were able to fall asleep in our tent. Like the beginning of the night was fine, other than the uneasy feeling that we both kind of had. I want to say it was around midnight when we started to hear the sounds of footsteps outside of our tent. And if you are like an avid camper, you know that like footsteps outside of your tent is like usually just an animal. However, you can always tell when it's an animal walking on 4 legs versus 2. You know what I mean? So when we heard the footsteps, we froze and we listened and we were like, yo, this is not the sound of an animal. Like, we could hear like kind of this low guttural growling that didn't sound like a bear. It didn't sound like any kind of animal that we've ever heard of before. Kind of like it wasn't a human, but it also wasn't quite animal. If that makes any sense. Does that make sense? I don't know what to tell you. It just sounded wrong. So my husband, being the big bad Brazilian that he is, he unzipped the tent and stuck his head out. Whatever he saw had him so damn shook that he muckled onto my arm so hard and he said, "Don't move. Don't move." He was like, "Don't look, don't look, don't look, don't move, don't look." And of course I looked. And what I saw has absolutely deterred me from going camping on the Appalachian Trail since. It was like this tall, pale, kind of like too thin to be a man type figure. Its arms were really gangly, like they were too long for its body. Mind you, I couldn't see it very clearly, okay, so I'm just like kind of telling you what the outline of what I saw looked like. I could tell that its head was kind of cocked to the side, like something does when it's kind of studying you, you know, like an animal or like something curious. It's like, and although I couldn't see its figure completely, I did see its glowing, creepy looking eyes. They looked like the glowing eyes of an animal off in the woods, but you know, they were like up too high to be an animal. It looked like a person, but somebody who's too tall to be a person, but they were standing like a man. Does that make sense to you? I don't really know how to explain it, but my mind knows what it looks like. We stayed locked in place, barely breathing, clutching on to each other, shaking. My chest felt like it was going to explode from holding everything in. Like the anticipation was absolutely crazy. Was this thing going to run at our tent? What was this thing going to do? Every instinct in my body told me to scream and run away, but both of those things in Appalachia are an absolute no-no. Those types of creatures love a good chase. Number one rule in Appalachia is if you've seen something, no you didn't. If you've heard something, no the fuck you didn't. And if you ever see something, you're supposed to just back away slowly. Not pay attention. I didn't see anything. I'm just gonna go back to my car. But anyway, after what seemed like forever, this thing finally stopped staring into our souls, dropped on all fours, and then skittered into the woods as fast as it could. When I say fast, like it was like there and then it wasn't. Like, yeah, we didn't go investigate, obviously. We hunkered down in our tent and we didn't move or sleep for the rest of the night. And as soon as the sky turned even the lightest bit of gray, we sprung into action and tore up our whole entire campsite and left as soon as we could. I've heard so many other stories of creepy things happening to people on the Appalachian Trail. So honestly, it just kind of seems like a thing that happens when you go there, which makes sense. I mean, those are the oldest mountains in America. They have a lot of history, a lot of creatures that we refuse to acknowledge. So if you ever decide to go to Appalachia, do not forget the rules of the woods.
One time I accidentally booked the most haunted hotel in Chicago for my friend and I am no longer allowed to book hotels. My friend and I were traveling to Chicago. It was my first time. She had been there before. I just went online. I found a hotel that was not super expensive, good reviews, and centrally located, and that was the Congress Plaza Hotel in Chicago, which is the most haunted building in Chicago, supposedly. We get into Chicago at like 11 o'clock at night. We get into an Uber from the airport to our hotel. Uber driver's being really chatty. We pull up to the Congress Plaza Hotel and he says, "Oh, my daughter's obsessed with this hotel. It's the most haunted hotel in Chicago." And we said, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, she really wants to stay the night here because it's supposedly really haunted." And we were like, "Please tell us you're joking." He was not joking and pulled up and was like, "Okay, see ya, have a good stay." At this point, we're terrified because I cannot do haunted, my friend cannot do haunted. Even like the idea of it being haunted, whether or not it actually was, we just were like, we're not gonna sleep. This is worst case scenario. Okay, this is the hotel that we pull up to. You can't really tell in this, but it's like pretty old. It was built in like the 1800s, like the late 1800s was when it was like booming. This is the lobby that we walked in. No one's in the lobby, and granted it's 11 o'clock at night, but still it felt very like, we had the idea of it being haunted in our minds, so that colored our experience here. We check in with the bellhop and we're like, haha, our Uber driver just said this place is haunted, hoping he'll be like, "Oh, that's just rumors, like we never have any issues." And he's like, yeah, we get that a lot. So he didn't reassure us at all. He basically confirmed. So at that point we're like, okay, stick it out, we can do this. We go to the elevator. This is the elevator, beautiful. We get in, our room was on the 11th floor. Let's just get to the room and we'll see how we feel, is what we decided. Because again, it's like 11:30 at this point. So we get in the elevator, I push 11, elevator takes us up, doors open, pitch black, just a pitch black hallway. And we said, nope. and went back to the lobby because there was not a shot in hell we were walking down a dark corridor in a supposedly haunted hotel. This is the ballroom, just wanted to show you. It's very pretty, supposedly very haunted. Anyway, so we go back to the lobby, we find a different bellhop this time. Mind you, they're dressed like they are from the 1800s, like red cap, red like button, whatever. Very old school bellhop outfit. And we're like, hey, so we just got on the elevator and it opened to a dark corridor. And he goes, oh yeah, like that happens sometimes, just try again and it'll work. And we said, what happens sometimes? What do you mean? Anyway, so I don't know how we did it, how we made ourselves do it, but we went up that elevator again and we walked all the way to our room. Now these are the hallways. And it doesn't look very eerie because it's not nighttime, the windows are open. But imagine this, if you can see at the end of this hallway is a door with a tiny window in it. We have to walk through, we probably walked through 3 doors like that down the hallway. It was like a labyrinth. The walls kept like curving around and we would like curve around and there's all these room numbers and then we get to another door with a hole in it and we'd have to walk through that. This is kind of like a better image of like how the walls went. Anyway, and here's a better picture of the door with the little window in it, which just felt very insane asylum to me. Spooky. Okay, anyway, we get to our room. It looks a little bit like this. I don't remember exactly what it looked like. We were just freaked out at that point. There was no chance that we were gonna stay there. So we got on the phone, found a hotel nearby that had vacancy. We go back to the lobby. They were super nice. They didn't end up charging us. We were like, I'm so sorry. I know we're annoying, but we can't stay here. Like, we can't do haunted. So at that point, we were like, we're not looking anything up about this hotel until tomorrow. So we got to the new hotel, went to sleep, still didn't sleep great. But the next day we were like, okay, let's Google what this hotel is really about. And this is what we found out. Okay, this is from an article in CBS News, but quoting Chicago Hauntings Ghost Tours. But basically saying it's a super haunted place in Chicago, describes it as being very creepy. It's also like very historical, like a lot of presidents stayed there. Al Capone had like a residence there for a while. And another creepy historical figure was like H.H. Holmes was rumored to frequent the lobby there and like find victims. If you haven't read Devil in the White City, do that now. So there have been many documented at the hotel, too many to try to start a comprehensive list. That's how many there have been. I'm not going to go through this one, but you can pause to read. But his ghost is referred to as the Shadow Man. The most haunted floor is the 12th floor, which is rumored to be haunted by a little boy. And they connect it to the death of Carol Langer, who was a little boy, and his, hold on, I'll show you. This is his mom. You can pause to read. But basically, she threw her children from a window and then herself. But basically, a lot of people have reported seeing a little boy in the hallway running around. No, thank you. Room 441 is on the 4th floor, and it is supposedly the most haunted room. Many people report calling security because they see a woman standing or hovering over their bed, pushing or tugging on the bed, pulling off their covers. This one doesn't scare me so much, and actually probably would have loved to see Peg Leg Johnny. He's just kind of like a funny ghost who roams the hallways. The ballroom that I showed you, there's also rumors about that. It's called the Gold Room, haunted by a ghost of an old woman. Some have reportedly had her in photographs from their weddings. There's also rumors that photos will be taken and like bridesmaids don't show up in the photos even though they were supposed to be there. And this is what really got us. Legend has it that the elevator often makes unplanned stops on the 8th floor. Remember how our elevator opened up to a dark corridor? Our theory at the time, because something that we Googled, which I can't find now and I don't have any proof that this is true, but there were rumors on these blogs that the 12th floor was completely shut down because it was so haunted. So what we thought happened was our elevator opened on the 12th floor instead of the 11th floor, and that's why it was dark, because it's a closed off floor. I have no idea if that's true, but that's what we thought. Another thing about the elevators, so fun. Anyway, if you're into haunted things, I've heard it's fun to stay at the Converse Plaza Hotel. I will not be joining you, but I wish you the best of luck. And tell Peg Leg Johnny I say hello.
Let's read some scary Reddit stories.
Once as a teenager, I was leaving a fast food drive-thru and someone in an old Bronco started to follow me. At first, I thought it was road rage and did the sorry wave and tried to let him pass, but he swerved at me like he was trying to hit my car. He pulled alongside of me and was screaming out the window, just incoherently furious, continuing to swerve at me. This was before the days of cell phones, and I was in an unfamiliar area of town. I was driving a Firebird and tried to outrun him, but he would run red lights and make crazy turns to try to keep up with me. I eventually ran into a dead end, and he pulled his truck across the road to block it. There were big ditches on either side, so I was stuck. He got out and started scrambling at my door handle. My doors were locked, and pounding on the windows, his face inches from mine, just screaming and screaming in a way that seemed like he couldn't even quite see me. Shaking and crying, I turned on my overhead light so he could see I was just a teenage girl and not who he was looking for, and he jumped on my hood and started pounding and drooling in thick white smears on my windshield. I was screaming and crying, and he stopped, held up one finger like, "Wait a minute," and scurried off to his truck. I floored the gas and ran into the ditch and drove like a crazy person for 45 minutes until I knew I had lost him. No idea what his deal was. My mom thought I made up this entire story to lie about the damage to my car and still seems hesitant to believe me. Hell no. When I was a child, I was always stricken by this irrational fear that when I went outside at night, I had to walk straight into the house without looking back, because if I looked back, someone would be following me. One day after dinner, I went out to the car to get my book bag, and I was continuing my ritual of walking straight inside without looking back, adrenaline pumping, anxiety going full force, and I just stopped and said to myself, "This is stupid," and I made myself look back. When I looked back, I saw what appeared to be someone crouched down behind my mom's car and was peeking their head around. They were just staring at me and smiling. It appeared to be a woman in her mid-30s, maybe 40, with curly, short blonde hair. We made eye contact for a second, and then she ducked back behind the car where I couldn't see her. I stood frozen for a second and then ran inside. I told my mom. We went outside to check. No one was there. My mom didn't exactly not believe me, but she wasn't very concerned either. I'm the same exact way. Like, if I'm walking inside at nighttime, I'm not looking behind me. If I'm walking upstairs, I'm not looking behind me. I'm panicking. My adrenaline is pumping. I'm the same exact way. So I'm just going to continue to not look behind me because there might actually be something there. When my wife was in college, she took a philosophy class or something. On the first day, everyone announced who they were, etc. Turns out she was sitting next to a police officer who was taking the class for continuing education or a promotion. Can't remember, but he was actively a police officer. This was really great for her because she's small and it was a nighttime class. They became friends-ish as much as two people sitting next to each other for a few classes are. He agreed to walk her to her car after class since the school wasn't in the best area and it made her feel safe. Around midterms, he stopped showing up. She's kind of confused but figured life happens and something else probably came up. A few weeks later, we're at her parents' house and her mom asked if we had heard about the police officer that had been arrested. We hadn't, so she begins to fill us in on the police officer that had been pulling women over and graping them in their cars. We live in a small town, but it gets super rural super fast if you leave, so nobody is passing these scenes as they're happening. Anyway, turns out that the officer graping women was the same guy that was walking her to her car after class every week, and the reason he wasn't in class was because he had been arrested. I had a feeling that that's where this story was going. That's crazy. My babysitter was unalived back in the mid-'80s when I was about 6 to 7 years old. They found her body in a garbage bag near a department store and never found the killer. No one knew anything about it, no witnesses, no clues, and this was a smaller city of about 50,000 people, so when a crime happens, word travels fast. About 15 years ago, a bunch of friends went to Canton, Texas for their huge First Monday sale. The whole town turns into a big flea market for one weekend. One booth had thousands of old photographs. The stall was maybe 20 by 20 with tables loaded with old pics. Randomly walk up, grab one, and I'm starting to take a picture of my oldest son in a military uniform from the Civil War era. Not that he sort of looked like my son, it was his identical twin. Even had the same expression on his face my son would have in pictures. Call my husband, he looks over and totally freaks out. I wanted to buy it, but he became so physically ill from looking at it, he said he couldn't even have it in the same car as him, much less at home. That boy reincarnated for sure.
Scary story time while I make slime. It's spooky scary month, so you know I had to do it. If this is your story time, DM me, because I don't remember who sent me this. I just found it in my notes. So yeah. Get your money's worth in what? Let it drain. Yes, finally the last of it. Yes. So when Kyle was 15 years old, their grandmother had passed away, and they ended up moving in their grandmother's house. Their grandmother always had one rule: stay out of the garage. Did I say garage or basement? Stay out of the basement. Growing up, Kyle never got the chance of going into his grandmother's basement once. So obviously when the grandmother passed away, the parents move in and they're renovating a whole bunch of things. And Kyle doesn't have a room, so they were like, how about we give you the basement? Now at first this kind of freaked Kyle out because he had never been in the basement before ever, right? But they said they were going to renovate it and give him his own space, and he liked that idea. At this point, Kyle was sleeping in the living room, and the living room was right next to the basement door. And at nighttime, Kyle could hear like faint tapping noises coming from the basement, but he kind of like shrugged it off as it being like a old pipeline down there, because it literally looked like that door hadn't been open for years. So a week or two goes by, and this is where Kyle starts to have the dreams. He starts to have dreams of a little boy telling him, oh, when can I come out, grandma? Like stuff like that. It's like a little creepy boy, and he's just standing in one spot with like these old ugly pajamas on. Y'all see flies flying around my room? It's because they're fruit flies, and they won't go away, and I don't know how to get rid of them. I forgot about my peaches, and then like they just, yeah. Anyways, back to the story. So the dreams are clearly freaking him out, so he asked his little sister if he could sleep in her room, and obviously she says yes, but he's still having these dreams. A month after they moved in, they finally started to renovate the basement. Now when they went into the basement, it literally looked like the 1950s. Like it had a room in there, but the room hadn't been touched in God knows how freaking long. So they start ripping up the concrete, ripping up the floors. So they're using a jackhammer on the floor to like get up the concrete when they hit something really hard, and they start digging, and they find an old chest. Like it's big. It's a big chest, like one of those like bedside, like I don't know how to explain it. A treasure chest. It's a treasure chest. Now obviously they pull it up because they like, hey, there's probably some money in here, like maybe grandma hit us some good, like, you know, whatever, And when they opened the chest, okay, it was bones from a little boy. Yeah, you heard me. Bones from... Oh my gosh, I didn't know there was still water in there. It's going everywhere. Please. Bones from a little boy. Yeah, bones. And it was about the same age that this little boy was having a dream of. Kyle said that the dreams never stopped all the way up until he moved out to go to college. And that was the last time he ever had a dream of like the little boy. But like... that was so creepy because they don't know if the grandma did it. And keep in mind, that house had always been in their family. It was passed down. So these bones could be from ages ago. But the fact that he was having dreams about this little boy saying, Grandma, can I come out now? No, you cannot come out now. I forgot to add that it wasn't like one of those dreams where the ghost like wants help. No, like this ghost was like tormenting this boy. Like not only did he have dreams, he was hearing noises, he was hearing whispers when he was going to sleep. Like he was getting tormented for real. His sister was completely unbothered. It was literally just him. And again, even after they found the bones, he was still getting tortured.
I've got a ghost story for you, so I hope you're tucked up in bed or cozy on your sofa, because this is a true story, and this all happened in a house in my family. My grandma's house was a haunted house. That I know for sure. So many cousins and my uncles and aunties all experienced something in that house, and my nan knew that something was there, and I think she liked scaring us. One of my aunties, when she was a teenager, was once woken up by someone laughing. She was sharing her bed with the sister at a time, so she thought it was just her sister, so she nudged her and told her to shut up, but her sister was asleep, and she kept on hearing this laughing. So she sat up, she looked around the room, and on the floor of the bedroom was a woman with silky long black hair, wearing a silk white dress, laying on the floor, looking up at her and laughing. My auntie said that she just got under the covers and just tried to get back to sleep, and she was so scared, and her sister wouldn't wake up, and she was just praying. She said she didn't believe in God, but she was just praying, and she heard that laughing all night. I'm so scared to look at the floor right now. I never liked the bathrooms, both of them. They gave me the weirdest feeling. One was like outside, it was like separate from the house, and the other was just at the top of the stairs. There was something so cold about them. And you know when you just get a vibe from a room? I used to go home with like cystitis because I used to hold in my wee that much because I used to hate using the bathroom. But when I had to stay over at my nan's house, I obviously had to use it. And I remember she had a dog called Whiskey, and this dog was the most kindest, gentlest dog ever. It was a Westie, wouldn't even hurt a fly, wouldn't even chase a squirrel. I opened the bathroom door one day and Whiskey was there just growling and barking crazy at me, just going barking mad, mad, mad. I was too scared to like leave the bathroom, so I called my granddad and he tried to pick Whiskey up, but he was going mental. But I left the room, but Whiskey was still facing the bathroom door, going mad. I know that kids and animals sense things, but animals, I really do think they do. There was a time I was talking to my nan and she had like a glass panel in her doorway, and I thought somebody was stood at the door, and I looked just thinking it was like a door-to-door salesman, and she stopped her conversation and said, "Do you think someone's there?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Someone is there. They're just watching you. There's no need to be scared." Shall we done? Yeah, it sticks with me for life. I was about 14 when that happened. Hated that whole thing. Now this part's pretty weird because it turned into a reoccurring dream for me. And touch wood, it doesn't happen again because I haven't dreamt about it in at least 2 years. But my nan's bedroom was like decorated in the 80s, and like she kept it like that up until she died. 4-poster bed, frilly bed sheets, absolute queen bedroom. She had Mills and Boon's books stacked everywhere. I loved her bedroom. Her bedroom was her space. I honestly loved it. She had teddies everywhere. I loved it. However, in my dream, I would walk down the hallway and just stand in the doorway of her bedroom. There was somebody laying down in the bed. I don't think it was my nan, but it was somebody pretending to be my nan. And they just sat up in the bed. And in the dream, they turn their head towards me, but I turn away before they look at me. Honestly, terrifying. I don't know if I experienced anything like that or it was just a dream because I've dreamt about it that many times. But I remember the first time it happened, I didn't want to stay at my nan's house again. In fact, I don't think I did. I think I said to my mum, I don't want to stay there anymore. And the last thing is pretty weird. My great-grandma, this happened before I was born, she stayed at my nan's house. In old 1940s, 1950s houses, they used to have glass panels above doorways. I don't know why. But she said that she was laying in bed and she noticed smoke behind the glass panel. However, what was strange was the smoke came through the glass panel in one ball, travelled in one ball across the corner of the room, eventually until it was above her, then it went down the back of her bed. For 2 weeks, she could not get out of bed. Her back was in that much agony. Doctors had to come to her, literally could not move. And then 2 weeks after she first saw the smoke, she laid down in bed, she looked above her, she saw the smoke, it went around the back of the room, out through the glass panel and vanished, and then her back pain went. What? I really do believe in haunted houses, maybe negative energy spaces. I don't know if ghosts are real, but maybe timelines crossing. I don't know, but if there's ever a time I experienced something, it was always in that house. Do you have a haunted house story, a grandma's house story? If you do, let me know, DM me or email me.
I grew up in a haunted house, and these are my stories. And yes, I'm back. Last time I was on here was about a couple months ago. And one of the last ghost stories I told was, one of the personal ones was my last day at the house. And it was like, I said it was the last ghost story from that house. And today's particular ghost story isn't from that home in particular or at all. It's new stuff that's been happening. And I don't know if they've followed us again, if it's something new, or because we're getting close to, All Hallows Eve, that stuff's popping off. But I got a story for you. I got a couple stories for you. 2 weeks ago, we were basically planning a family party at our house, at our condo. No particular reason whatsoever. Mrs. Menace wanted everyone to come over, and she was gonna make pasta and, have a good old-fashioned, Italian Sunday dinner. That's what she wanted to do. So that morning, I'm eating breakfast. I'm at the dining room table, and this like scent of women's perfume just like comes wafting by. Now, it doesn't go by me. It just like comes by and it sits right where I am, like almost like they're sitting in the same seat I am sitting. And I could just, like a strong scent of like women's perfume, but like an older woman, like a grandma perfume, if you know what I'm talking about. So I called Mrs. Menace. I'm like, hey, come over here real quick. And she's in the kitchen doing the pasta. And I said, come over here. I need you to smell something. So she comes over. I'm like, do you smell that? And she's able to smell the woman's perfume as well. And again, it's not a scent that my wife wears. It was early-ish in the morning, like 10:30, 11 o'clock. And early-ish, I say. And we could smell like distinctly an older woman's perfume. And we couldn't figure it out. And then I got up and started, sniffing around like a dog, and it wasn't anywhere else in the house or in the room. It was only right where I was sitting. And we don't have anything else that smells like that has that scent. And I sat there trying to, figure out where it is, and it wouldn't leave the spot where I was sitting. And then after some time, it began to dissipate and just disappear altogether. I couldn't even smell it at all anymore. Almost like whatever it was came, hung out next to me or in front of me, and then gone, was out. So what was it? Because again, there's nothing in the house that smells like that. It had a distinct smell of an older woman's perfume. If you've ever smelled grandma perfume, you know what I'm talking about. Like, it's something someone would have wore like in the 70s or 80s. Like, it's a very distinct scent. And it was just there, stuck in front of me, and then it was gone after some time. Now, I will admit, the window or the sliding glass door to like our deck was open, but we're on the second floor. And how much perfume was someone wearing when they walked by for it to go up, waft over, go into the living room and sit there? Now, is it possible? Yes, I will definitely agree it's possible. However, there's other stuff that's been happening in the house that makes me believe maybe there's something there now. Now, granted, like I said, it smelled like an older woman's perfume, like a grandma or something. So it's very possible that maybe whoever lived in the house prior to us, the condo was built in the 70s, maybe because we were doing a family party or something like that, they were investigating to see what we were doing, Because there is something in that house, entity that my wife has more or less felt, Mrs. Menace has felt, that is curious about the baby. I've talked about it before on here in older stories. But yeah, so that begs the question, what was it?
This is probably the scariest case to come out of the Appalachian Mountains. Now, this one is personal to me because I actually worked on this case. Now, I had a friend who lived in North Carolina, and he was a paranormal investigator. He reaches out to me one day and is like, hey, so I got this weird case, and, I'm kind of stumped. Like, could you help me with it? Apparently, there was this Native American family who lived on the reservation, and they had a daughter who was like 16 or 17, and at the time, she was getting dropped off from a friend's house one night at her parents' home. Well, her friend drops her off, and she said when she got out of the car, she had to walk down this like bumpy, gravelly, muddy road. And she said as she's walking down this gravel road, and right next to her, is the woods, she sees this man standing on the side of the road. And she said he had this black hat on, a black cloak, and she said she couldn't really see his face at the time because it was turned. And she said as she walked a little closer to him, he turned his face, and she said he had no mouth, no nose, but these solid red eyes, and he was just staring at her. Well, she said, she walked as fast as she could to the house, and this man began like following her. So she runs inside her house, and she's like screaming, crying at this time. Her dad's like, what's going on? Like, why are you crying? She said, there's this man out there in a hat, and like he was following me. So her dad runs out of the house and just starts looking for this guy. He doesn't find anyone. He doesn't see anything. And he's like, you sure there was a guy out there? And she's like, yeah, I seen him. Like, he was on the road and he was like, followed me to the house. So a couple weeks pass and they start noticing that their daughter is waking up at night from having these terrible dreams, that she is seeing this man in her room. And not only that, she is waking up with these scratches all over her body. In the next coming months, right, there was something banging on the windows, banging on the doors, right? They could hear scratching sounds coming from the roof all night long, except when the father would go and investigate and try to figure out what was going on, like he couldn't find anything. And then one night, the daughter is having like this terrible nightmare, and the mother in the other room, she could hear this going on. So she walks over to her bedroom, which the door is halfway open. She looks in and she said she could see a man standing next to her bed with this hat and this cloak on. She goes in her room, she flips on the lights, and she said it was gone. And not only this thing was, attacking, this girl was attacking their home. It had left scratch marks on the truck, on the home. There were claw mark footprints all around the home. These are real pictures from some of the damage that it was causing and the scratch marks that it left on this girl. Now, I started looking into this case and I started researching what we come to know today as the Hatman. And as I got deeper into this case, I started to notice weird things were happening to me. Like, I lived up in Chicago at the time, and one night I'm asleep, and I just remember it was 3 a.m. I wake up to the sound of a scream, and I'd never heard anything like that before. So I immediately jump up. I think someone's in the house. Like, what is going on? I searched my entire home. There was no one there. The doors were locked. The windows were closed. So as I'm getting ready to go back to bed, I walk past the living room, and as I turn, sitting in a lazy boy recliner is what looks like a man in a cloak and a hat, just rocking. And I look again, he's gone. But I could see movement of the chair, and that's someone obviously had bumped it or had been sitting in it. And that like sent chills down my back. And I immediately like went into the bedroom, closed the door. And mysteriously, as all of this started, it just one day stopped. And to me, what I thought personally was this was a case of the Hatman.